It's insulting that you're
me regarding
sitting
you
here,
as a fellow citizen.
that you're
That's
sitting
what I think
here,
we should see.
whatever ethnicity you are, explaining to me
whatever ethnicity
about
I'm,
what it's like to be black
whatever
in America.
ethnicity I'm, I'll tell you what I am. I'm an Indian American. I'm proud of it. But I think we should have this debate. Black, white, doesn't matter.
I think we should have this
on
debate
the content of the ideas.
Hey, folks, Dale Jackson here. We got to talk about Don Lemon getting very, very, very upset at Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. He's very upset because Ramaswamy showed up at the NRA event last week and said things about the Civil War that Don Lemon found very offensive. And Don Lemon thinks he's the only one allowed to talk about these things because he's a black American. And only he's allowed to discuss these things. Only him. Not racist at all. The best part about this, in my opinion, is how his co-host sets him up. Poppy Harlow completely sets him up here and says, no, go ahead.
We have time.
I don't really see what one has to do with the other, especially consider and using the Civil War to talk about black Americans. That war was not fought for black people to have guns. That's not.
That war was fought for black people to have freedoms in this country.
Yeah.
Actually, that's why the Civil War was fought.
Okay.
And the sad
but
part about
it wasn't fought for black people to have guns. I think.
Actually, you know, funny fact is, black people did not get to enjoy the other freedoms until their Second Amendment rights were secured. And I think that that's one of the lessons that we learned.
Black people still aren't allowed to enjoy the freedoms.
I disagree with you on that, Don. I disagree with you. And I think you're doing a disservice to our country by failing to recognize the fact that we have equality before the law.
And you live in this country, then you can disagree with me. But we're not. You mentioned in here that we're three different shades of melanin.
Don, I think we have to be able to talk about these issues in the open, regardless of the color of our skin.
The saddest part about all of this is when Don Lemon tries to make this a conversation about the color of their skin. Not like metaphorically or anything like that, but literally the color of Vivek Ramaswamy's skin was the issue. If it was just a little bit darker, then he could have this conversation. If he was black, he would be allowed to have this conversation. But he is not allowed because he is the wrong type of minority. And apparently it goes Indian, and then above that is black. And I don't know the other hierarchies that we have to operate under. But Don Lemon wants you to know that he is on the top. And he is allowed to control the conversation because of that. Now, they continue this conversation talking about the Second Amendment, talking about the Civil War, and Don Lemon continues to act absolutely unprofessional and a little bit crazy.
Actually, I think it's insulting to black people. It's insulting to me as an African American. I don't want to sit here and argue with you because it's infuriating for you to put those things together. It's not right. Your telling of history is wrong.
What part of the history was wrong?
What part of the history was wrong? That the Civil War was fought. You're making people think that the Civil War was fought for black people, only for black people to get guns and for black people to have.
The Civil War was fought for black people in this country to get freedoms, a noble mission. And I think that even after we succeeded, we had to actually secure those freedoms.
To reduce it in a speech at the NRA to say you're making people think, or you're trying to say that black people to get guns, that was the reason that you're there at the NRA. That was the reason for the Civil War.
It is a
fact.
That's
reductive.
It's not
and
reductive,
I think it's
Don.
insulting. There are a whole plethora of reasons for the Civil War.
With due respect, I find your explanation reductive and actually insulting, including to black Americans, to say that black people today, compared to 1964, 1865, haven't made progress in part because of the freedoms we secured. And the Second Amendment was part of what secured them that freedom.
I cannot keep a thought if you guys are talking to me in my ear. So hang on 1 second. So to say that black people, say what you said again?
Black people secured their freedoms after the Civil War. It is a historical fact, Don. Just study it. Only after their Second Amendment rights were secured.
The argument in all of this is pretty simple. The Second Amendment right is required in order to protect all the other rights. We understand this. We get this. Everyone knows this. This is why the Second Amendment exists in the first place, to protect all the other rights, to protect people from the government. Now, you could say, well, they have nukes. Yes, that's correct, and they have a bigger military. The idea, of course, is to deter them from utilizing them against their own people. That's pretty simple here. And I don't understand why Don Lemon does not understand this. I also don't understand why he doesn't understand why some of the early gun control measures were used against black people. They were literally passed for that reason. It happened. Vivek Ramaswamy tries to explain this to Don Lemon, but he is not interested. Instead, Don Lemon wants you to know that it's an insult to him as a black person to discuss these things with him. So why is Don Lemon discussing them then? Oh yeah, Poppy Harlow set him up to look like a fool. And to show you that both Poppy Harlow and Don Lemon know that they look like fools here, watch how they end this thing. It's embarrassing.
It's insulting that you're
me
sitting
regarding
here,
you as a fellow citizen.
That you're
That's
sitting
what I think
here,
we should see.
whatever ethnicity you are, explaining to me
whatever ethnicity
about
I'm,
what it's like to be black
whatever
in America.
ethnicity I'm, I'll tell you what I am. I'm an Indian American. I'm proud of it. But I think we should have this debate. Black, white, doesn't matter.
I think we should have this
on
debate.
the content of the ideas.
If you're going to do it, you should do it in an honest way and in a fair way. And what you're doing is not an honest and fair way. Okay? But we appreciate you coming on.
With due respect, Don, I look forward to continuing that conversation.
We'll
Thank
continue
you.
the conversation.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you, Pop.
We'll talk about China.
Yes, let's talk about China.
Next time you come back.
Oh, thank you. Much to say on declaring independence from China.
Okay,
something you can
move
add
on now, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don Lemon cuts the interview off. He says, I can't do it anymore. This is just too dishonest. That means he, of course, cannot defend the positions he's taking. Ramaswamy knows that. And then Harlow mentions that they should have been discussing China and other things like that instead of Don Lemon's personal hangups. Don Lemon's unprofessional. That's clear here. He's playing the role of news guy when he's not. So they kind of put him in a no-win situation for his skill set. But what's worse about this is he had no interest in actually listening to what the guy had to say because he just declared that he is dishonest. And this is a thing that people in the media have been doing lately, deciding they're not even going to hear out other opinions if they already disagree with them. And that's probably a bad idea for our country and for our discourse, because there will be no discourse unless you agree with me already. And of course, I think we see why Don Lemon doesn't want to have discourse and conversations on his show, because he looks like a complete fool and he gets embarrassed. And again, it's worth noting, Poppy Harlow set him up for this. This could be part of what pushes Don Lemon both over the edge and out at CNN.